Isaac married and had twins, Esau and Jacob. Jacob, who was also called Israel, had 12 sons. One of his sons was Joseph. Now Israel, or Jacob, loved Joseph more than any of his other sons, because he had been born to him in his old age, and he made a special robe for him. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. Joseph had a dream, and when he told it to his brothers, they hated him all the more. He said to them, "Listen to this dream I had. We were binding sheaves of corn out in the field, when suddenly my sheaf rose and stood upright, while your sheaves gathered round mine and bowed down to it." His brothers said to him, "Do you expect to boss us about? Do you think you're going to tell us what to do?" And they hated him all the more because of his dream and what he had said. Then he had another dream, and he told it to his brothers. "Listen," he said, "I had another dream, and this time the sun and moon and 11 stars were bowing down to me." When he told his father as well as his brothers, his father rebuked him and said, "What is this dream you had? Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow down to the ground before you?" His brothers were madly jealous of him, but his father kept the matter in mind. Now his brothers had gone to graze their father's flocks, and Israel said to Joseph, "As you know, your brothers are grazing the flocks near Shechem. I am going to send you to them." "Very well," he replied. "Go and see if all is well with your brothers and with the flocks, and bring word back to me." Then he sent him off. When Joseph arrived at Shechem, a man found him wandering around in the fields and asked him, "What are you looking for?" He replied, "I'm looking for my brothers. Can you tell me where they are grazing their flocks?" "They have moved on from here," the man answered. "I heard them say, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them near Dothan. But they saw him in the distance, and before he reached them, they plotted to kill him. "Look," they said to each other, "that little dreamer is coming to us. Let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns, and say that a wild animal devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." A cistern was a deep hole carved out of the rock to store water in. When Reuben, one of the brothers, heard this, he said, "Let's not take his life. Don't shed any blood. Throw him into this cistern here in the wilderness, but don't lay a hand on him." Reuben said this to rescue him from them and take him back to his father later. When Joseph came to his brothers, they stripped him of his special robe and threw him into the cistern. The cistern was empty, there was no water in it. As they sat down to eat their meal, they looked up and saw a crowd of Ishmaelites coming. Their camels were loaded with spices, balm and myrrh, and they were on their way to take them down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain if we kill our brother and cover up his blood? Come, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites and not lay our hands on him. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." His brothers agreed. So, when the merchants came by, his brothers pulled Joseph up out of the cistern and sold him for 20 shekels of silver to the Ishmaelites, who took him to Egypt. Then they got Joseph's robe, slaughtered the goat, and dipped the robe in the blood. They took the special robe back to their father and said, "We found this. Have a look. Is it Joseph's?" Jacob recognized it and said, "It is Joseph's. Some wild animal has had him. Joseph has been torn to pieces." Then Jacob tore his clothes, put on sackcloth, and mourned for his son many days. All his sons and daughters came to comfort him, but he refused to be comforted. "No," he said, "I will continue to mourn until I join my son in the grave." So his father wept for him. Meanwhile, the Ishmaelites sold Joseph in Egypt to one of the Pharaoh's officials, the captain of the guard. Joseph was now a slave. And yet, his dreams were to come true. Do you remember Elizabeth, the relation that Mary went to see? She was married to a priest called Zechariah. Again, Elizabeth was not able to conceive, and they were both very old. And again, a miracle occurred. One day, Zechariah had been chosen to go into the temple of the Lord to burn incense. And when the time for the burning of incense came, all the assembled worshippers were praying outside. Then an angel of the Lord appeared to him, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was startled and was gripped with fear. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah. Your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you are to call him John. He will be a joy and delight to you, and many will rejoice because of his birth. For he will bring back many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God." Zechariah asked the angel, "How can I be sure of this? I'm an old man, and my wife is well on in years." The angel said to him, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to tell you this good news. From now on you will be dumb, not able to speak until the day this happens, because you did not believe my words." Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondered why he was staying so long in the temple. When he came out, he could not speak to them. They realized he had seen a vision in the temple, for he kept making signs to them, but remained unable to speak. When his time of service was completed, he returned home. After this, his wife Elizabeth became pregnant. "The Lord has done this for me," she said. "He has shown his favor and taken away my disgrace among the people." When it was time for Elizabeth to have her baby, she gave birth to a son. On the 8th day, they came to circumcise the child, and they were going to call him Zechariah after his father. But his mother spoke up and said, "No, he is to be called John." They said to her, "There is no one among your relatives who has that name." They made signs to his father to find out what he would like to name his child. He asked for a writing tablet, and to everyone's astonishment he wrote, "His name is John." Immediately his mouth was opened and his tongue set free, and he began to speak, praising God. All the neighbors were filled with awe, and everyone was talking about it. His father, Zechariah, was filled with the Holy Spirit and said, "Praise be to the Lord, the God of Israel, because he has come to his people to save them, and to remember the oath he swore to our father Abraham. And you, my child, will be called a prophet of the Most High, for you will go before the Lord to prepare the way for him. John grew up and became strong in spirit and went out to live in the wilderness until he appeared publicly to preach to the people. Meanwhile, when Mary was 3 years old, Joachim and Anna decided the time had come to fulfill their promise and to offer her to the Lord. Joachim gathered the young girls of the neighbourhood to form an escort, and he made them go in front of Mary, carrying torches. Captivated by the torches, the young child followed joyfully to the temple, not once looking back at her parents, nor weeping as she was parted from them. She ran toward the temple and threw herself into the arms of the high priest, who was waiting for her at the gate of the temple with the elders. And who was the high priest? None other than Zechariah, the father of John. Zechariah blessed her and brought her into the Holy of Holies, a place where only the high priest was permitted to enter once a year on the Day of Atonement. He placed her on the steps of the altar, and the grace of the Lord descended upon her. She stood up and expressed her joy by dancing, much to the amazement of all the onlookers. Mary dwelt in the temple for 9 years until, reaching an age for marriage, she was taken from the temple by the priests and elders and entrusted to an older man called Joseph, for him to take care of her. Questions. What was Jacob also called? Number 2. How many sons did Jacob have? Number 3. Who was his favourite son? Number 4. What was the name of the angel who appeared to Zechariah? Number 5. Why did Joachim and Anna take Mary to the temple? Could you answer these, please, and send them in an email to me? Thank you.